Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of What's Offensive Weekly. This is Scott. Jeff's going to be here very, very shortly. I'm sure he's off somewhere offending somebody in some new and improved way. So we wanted to go ahead and give you a little bit of an idea of what you could expect in this episode number 3. In this episode, I start off really answering the question that Jeff asked at the end of episode 2, and that is, what was so offensive to me? What offended me when I was at church, of all places? Well, in this episode, I actually go ahead and talk about that. Those of you who know me personally, family and friends who are listening to this, if you want to know more, if you want to talk to me about why I was offended, please just reach out to me and I'll be happy to talk to you about it in more detail. Those of you who don't know me, don't worry about it. So we talk about that. And then really at the end of this, towards the end of this podcast, Jeff tells this story. He shares a theory. And I just got to tell you right now, it really blew me away. The conclusion he led to, because I didn't know where he was going initially. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I was like, all right, he sounds like a racist here. But at the end, like I understood exactly what he was going at, and it's a really powerful point. So, all that to say, thanks again for listening. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. So, ready? Toughen up your skin. It's What's Offensive Weekly.
A friend of mine told me this a long time, and again, not to get too political, but fuck it, whatever. They always said, he said the difference between Democrats and Republicans is Democrats will promise you a paycheck today, and Republicans will promise you one tomorrow. And what he's saying is that you're going to see, Democrats are more like, hey, we're going to give you stuff right now. Here you go, here you go, here you go, and Republicans want to give you opportunities to build businesses and employ people and have jobs and all that stuff. Well, that's very hard to see people who can't see the big picture or the long picture, so it's very much a on demand thing. You want it right now. You want it now. You want to see action now. You want to see money now. You want to see jobs now. And that's not necessarily how it works.
Do you want $1 million check right now? Or do you want a $10,000 check every month for the next
right? Exactly. And typically people are going to, they wouldn't do the math. They would just go, I want $1 million right now.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
And that's an offensive way. I'm sure people hear that and that's not why I'm a Democrat.
Right.
But I understand, and I can see where people would conclude that.
Well, Charles Barkley said he's a big Republican.
Yeah.
And he always says, people have been, back to your statement before, people have been voting for Democrat for 50 years and they're still poor.
Yep.
They are.
What have you got to lose? Everything.
Everything.
Everything. That free Obama phone, you're going to lose it.
I know. Sure.
Yeah.
So now that you're a little calmed down here from that and everything, I'm sorry, man. I maybe you don't want to go into this, but I want to know what happened at church. Can you talk about this or no?
Yeah, I think I can talk about it. I think I can talk about it because, so one of the things that I want to ask you, before I answer this question, I will answer it. My question is it in your character, Jeff, that it is your intent to offend people?
Sometimes.
But in general, do you basically walk around going, I wonder how
No.
like just looking for ways to offend? No. But there are times that all right, if I say this, I might offend them, and you're like, all right, I'm going to do it anyway.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I bet there's also in times that you may find yourself going, I'm going to try to offend them.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's pretty common for most people. Not that it makes it right or wrong, but I think that's pretty common for most people. I say that because it's not my intent to offend anyone. I really try to be a pretty inoffensive person, which means then that I can't often really say how I feel because I want to maintain relationships, and I ask myself, is the risk of injuring this relationship, is that more important, or is me voicing this more important? And I weigh those kind of things quite a bit. So all that to say, we always teach that there are 2 sides to every story. Or Extreme said, there are 3 sides to every story.
That's
yes.
Right.
There's yours, there's theirs, and there's the truth. And that is probably the best answer. So, which speaks to the fact that when we come in on an issue or an event, there is how we perceived it, there's how somebody else perceived it, and then there's the truth. You can look at Charlottesville and everything that happened there. The white supremacists view it one way, the Antifa view it another, and then there's the truth. If we could videotape that night, and if we could somehow find out everyone's motives, we could have a better picture of exactly what happened there that night.
Okay.
Because when the Antifa says it was all about white supremacists, well, that's not true. I'll give you an example. Right. When somebody says, Donald Trump said there were good people down there that night. Well, my response to that is, I don't believe that Donald Trump is saying that the white supremacists are good people. I believe that what he's saying is there were people there that night that were marching that were not white supremacists, but they were people who felt like, listen, I do not believe it's a good idea that we take down every one of these monuments.
Well, in that same respect, let me just cut you real quick and ask you, is a person defined as a bad person just from one trait? I mean, just because a person is a white, say they're a white supremacist, say they whatever, does that make them a bad person?
Would you believe if I said basically we're all bad people? Some of us just have more positive qualities than others.
I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where I'll go.
But I mean, that's my thing. There's a lot of anti-whiteism anymore. About a lot of that stuff, and if you said, black supremacists are the same thing, Black Lives Matter, all that stuff.
Yeah.
They're black supremacists. So are they bad people, or are they just trying to fight for one thing of, whatever? So
right.
It's just to make a blanket statement like just because somebody is a white supremacist, well, that's bad. Sure. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person.
Yeah, but there are some things that are really much more horrible than others.
Sure.
And we're not, and I think right now we're talking about ideology,
okay,
not necessarily behavior.
Okay.
Because the moment you and I bring pedophilia in, yes, we feel confident, like, yes, that's a horrible person.
Sure, absolutely.
But an ideology, right. Now there are some ideologies that are worse than others. There are capitalists and there are socialists. I can't see why a socialist is a bad person because they're a socialist, and a capitalist is a good. No, those are different ideologies.
Well,
white supremacists, why I would say are white supremacists worse, I would say any supremacist is bad.
Human supremacist?
Stupid. Any supremacist is bad. Yeah. The ideology in itself isn't, but what the ideology oftentimes lead to behaviorally, that's what makes it so dangerous.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
It's kind of like the whole thing of, it's not bad to think bad thoughts, it's bad to do bad things.
Correct.
Yeah, sure.
So that in Charlottesville, how do I want to say this? I had a debate with somebody who I said, the only people that I fault in Charlottesville are the police. Now, that's not to say, oh, so you don't fault the guy who ran over the girl? Of course I fault him for that. But I hold the police more responsible for that because, listen, you knew gasoline and fire were going to be coming there, and you didn't do enough to keep them separated. And some of the video supports that these two groups were face to face. And what I said was, I'm unconvinced that in Charlottesville, the Antifa weren't looking for a fight. And I'm definitely not convinced that the white supremacists weren't looking for a fight. They were both looking for a fight. Okay. Now, would I side with one more than the other? In this case, yes, I do. But I'm certainly not Antifa. I'm certainly not them.
Is it Antifa or Antifa?
I'm definitely not.
I'm just asking.
I've always heard it referred to as Antifa.
Okay. All right.
Anti-fascist. I'm not.
Yeah, Antifa.
Antifa, whatever.
Okay. I don't know.
I'm definitely not for them. I'm definitely not a white supremacist. But in my mind, what needed to happen is the police. I didn't wink at you. What needed to happen there was the police needed to do a really good job of keeping those two groups apart, because both groups think they're fine.
But in that same respect, what are the cops supposed to do? Both groups have a right to go wherever they want.
They do, but oftentimes,
so they can get the face to face. It's not like as soon as the cop says no, you can't go over there. Well, you're infringing on whichever group's rights to not go where they want to go.
You don't have the right to go where you want to go. You have the right to protest,
Okay.
and there's certain things you have to do. You have to basically, or if you're going to have a protest, you have to basically get certain paperwork and things like that.
Okay.
Okay. My point is this: there are plenty of times that you have like some group that's going to protest, and they have a very distinct point in which they're not allowed to go past. All right.
Okay.
And that's the point, is that like when the KKK has had rallies, the police are there to separate them from the people that are against them. I think somebody dropped the ball here in Charlottesville. All right. All that to say this. I despise the idea of only one side of the story being told, and it's much more offensive to me if you and I are just talking right now. You and I are not an authority. We have no power.
Speak for yourself.
This microphone carries no real weight. People who listen to this know it's just two guys sharing their opinions.
Right.
But from the pulpit, I'm popping my peas on this mic and I can hear it. From that position, though, when they speak, it carries a certain kind of weight. And so from that position to only share, in my opinion, what is one perspective, it's offensive. So here's what it was. Right now, they're going through a series and they're talking about things like racism. And for instance, tomorrow is going to be sexism.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not here to debate whether or not those are topics that should be broached in church or not.
Okay.
It's fine if you want to go ahead and broach those. But I would hope that there's not a pastor in the world that needs to walk out and tell the congregation, racism is bad. Okay.
Okay. Sure. Right.
Oh,
Right.
Let me take this cross down. I was totally unaware.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that we're
I was
aware
just
of
going to
that.
burn it, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, I can't find that passage in my Bible. My hood's in the way. Right. I didn't, I don't think that that's where we were.
Sure.
And I don't think that he is necessarily saying that that's how we are. But what he basically did was he opened it up reading an excerpt from Martin Luther King's book, A Letter from a Birmingham Jail. Now, you're talking to a guy who I own, or at least I own a book on all of Martin Luther King's speeches. I've read it, and I'm not lying to you when I tell you I have literally wept reading some of the things that he has said in there. It is so moving. There was a certain point in my life, I was reading anything I could get my hands on. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. I read that. I was going back and finding all these speeches that Malcolm X gave or Martin Luther King gave. In my home, I had this poster of Martin and Malcolm the one day that they met in Capitol Hill in Washington D.C. I was definitely there. And I'm not saying now I'm David Duke. All right, I'm just saying this is my background. All right, and I think that there are some people who probably think I'm racist. But there are other people who are African American, or they're Asian, or they're whatever, that they do not believe that I'm racist, and I personally don't believe.
Do you realize there's a huge difference between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King?
At one point in time, there was.
Okay.
At the end
is now.
At the end of Malcolm X's life, it was not so far apart, which is why he was killed.
Okay.
So
okay.
So the point is. And we can talk about Malcolm X sometime.
Okay.
I'm not an authority, but I can give you my perspective on that. But the point being, there are people who are racist that do not realize that they're racist. They just think this is how I've always thought.
Okay.
I acknowledge that.
Okay.
So I'll even acknowledge that it's possible that I am racist on some things and I'm just unaware of it. I'll acknowledge that. So if that's the point you want to make to me from the pulpit, that's fine. I can accept that. Here's where it goes bad. When he starts talking about that in the white church, in this letter from a Birmingham jail, he wrote this letter to a number of these white pastors in the South that he had hoped would help them with civil rights issues, and then they did not. They failed. And so now this pastor is now bringing that to us, and he's asking the question, have we done enough? Have we done enough? And he starts quoting statistics about in the white church that the majority believe that racism doesn't exist, that it's a thing of the past. And basically what happened is he begins to present this case, and it is entirely one-sided. It is entirely you, meaning you, the congregation, you, the white congregation, this is at least how I received it, are the problem.
Your pastor is telling you this?
Yes.
Okay.
He then goes and he says, I'm going to now show you, I'm going to play a video of this other pastor that was part of a panel, and they're going to talk about their experiences as being black. And so this video comes on, and it's a panel of all black guys, and they're going to tell their story. And so this guy, this main pastor who's going to talk, he's a young guy, I guess, and probably my age, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger. I can't tell.
Young, but yeah, go ahead.
So he starts telling a story about when he was young. He couldn't go to a pool, a swimming pool. He wasn't allowed to go. Okay. Now, for me, a very, 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 very important distinction is, what do you mean by you weren't allowed to go? Because the story goes, he went and visited some cousins, I believe, and he said, I want to go swimming. And they said, yeah, but the pool's a long way away. And he's like, no, the pool's right over there. And like, we're not allowed to go to that pool. Are you saying that you weren't allowed to go to that pool because of like Jim Crow laws, or you're not allowed to go there because your mom and dad said you're not allowed to go there, and your mom and dad said you aren't allowed to go there because there's so many white people, or because you're going to risk getting into trouble, or blah, 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 blah? Because I think that's an important difference.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It makes all the difference in the world.
Now, because, so that was one story that he shared. And then he started basically spewing a number of facts about laws that are still in place in Alabama, and Thomas Jefferson, and he was a slave owner. He starts spewing all this stuff. And I start getting angrier and angrier. Now, am I angry because he said that Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner? No, I'm not angry about that. But I am angry that there are some people who to this very day will say, because Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner, basically the Constitution, because he was a slave owner, that had to affect the Constitution, and therefore it's all null and void. Or because he says that basically all men are created equal, he owned slaves. He really didn't believe that. He really means all white men. And that is something I heard. I believe it was, I apologize, I believe it was Sharp, Sterling Sharp, former Baltimore Ravens tight end.
Okay.
I believe he said on one of his shows that therefore the Constitution is really for all white men. All white men are created equal. So to hear that,
we're clearly not. I'm clearly better than you.
Yes.
So I mean,
that offended me, and I'm trying to think. Ultimately, what it came down to, because there were still some other things that I can't think of at this very moment that finally offended me. I walked out of there upset because there are two sides to the story. There are three sides to the story, and I cannot deal with only being told you are the problem. I just listen. Do I believe that white people are racist? Yes, there are white people who are racist. Do I believe that, as far as equality is concerned, that we have a way to go? Sure, I'll acknowledge all that, but I'm not the only one who has a skin in this game. That this isn't a problem that only I or only white people can solve. And I think that it is irresponsible to go ahead and present it in that way, as if you're the problem. You got to get this fixed, and once you do that, then everything's going to be hunky-dory. Once you do that, then it's going to be the way it is going to be in heaven. Well, listen, that is ridiculous. Everybody has a role in this, and everybody has got to get their act together. You can't just pick out one group. That is why I'm like, nope.
Now, does this roll all back to what we were talking about earlier in guilt in the church? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel mad, or do you feel guilty?
Do I personally? I don't feel any guilt.
Okay.
And he even mentioned white privilege. He even mentioned white privilege in here, and talked about how I believe he said basically he now better understands it. So,
the This is I got to interject here. This is something that really bothers me. I'm not offended by it, but this is what people have to realize. All this shit with the down south and tearing down statues and protests and all and all this stuff, and that guy Thomas Jefferson owned a slave. He was an asshole. Slaves. Yeah. Whatever. So people have to understand something that it's very. This is What's Offensive Weekly, so I don't even care. Here, this is what the deal is. People have to realize that back then, in the 1700s, 1800s, whatever, they had never seen black people. Okay, they've seen the Indians, and they didn't think that they were human. Okay, mm-hmm. They were savages, they were beasts, they weren't human. Okay, then
do you think they really believe they weren't human?
Hold on, I'm getting there. Okay, now see. Then with the and then they started bringing over all the slaves on the boats and everything, and they saw all these dark skinned people. They couldn't speak English. They were very uncivilized. Why wouldn't they think that, hey, if somebody tells them, hey, they're not really people, we just got them from the jungle or whatever, people just go, okay. And people were fucking dumb back then. They're dumb today, and I'll get to that too. But that's how. It's not like everybody back then who had a slave, which was a very small percentage of the population, by the way, who had a slave. You were very rich if you had a slave. But nonetheless, it's not like all those people were terrible human beings because they were doing this to the slaves. They didn't really think that they were human beings. That's how you get that's how you get people to do bad things. The slave traders dehumanized them and brought them over here and made tons of money from it. That's how Hitler got people to hate the Jews. They weren't human. They were a subspecies.
Okay.
And today that's how they sell abortion. That's not a fetus. It's not a person. It's just a clump of cells. So you don't have to feel bad about killing it.
Okay. I want to go ahead and clarify what you're meaning, what you're saying.
Sure.
Because I know you don't care if you're offending people, but I don't want them to get the wrong idea of what you're saying.
Fair enough. Yes.
There's no part of you that's saying I'm pro-slavery.
Right.
Okay?
Correct.
You're simply stating the way slavery was able to be as dominant as it was is because the people in the South ultimately came to a conclusion. They almost psychologically had to come to a conclusion that these African Americans, these blacks, were less than.
Right.
Okay. Not because they didn't realize this is a quote unquote human.
When
you kept saying they didn't see them as human, I'm thinking they could. I don't think that's true initially. Like when you first see this animal that has wings and flies, I've never seen that bird before, but I'm pretty sure it's a bird.
I mean, it still looks like a human. I understand,
yes.
But in that same respect, people were very, very much less educated back then. Okay, so that you see this person, and they have totally different skin, they have totally different hair, they have totally different all these different traits. They're not speaking English. They are literally like eating fish off a bone. Which I had friends who was from Africa who they were both worked with me, who both shared a literal fish from a bowl. So it's not that, and that was last year. So it's not like it's that long ago.
So culturally, they do some weird things.
They do a lot of weird things.
Weird to you,
yes, weird to me, exactly, and then especially weird to people in the 1700s. So and then you get people to saying, no, trust me, they're not real people. They're not humans. Okay. They're not, and then if you notice as the time goes on, people were typically like, okay, that's cool. And then as the slaves progressed and they started to get more educated, they could speak, more civilized. They could speak, they could talk, communicate with them. And then people started to see them in the North mostly, as actual people. And they're like, holy shit, what have we been doing? Type of, in a nutshell, that type of thing. So they're like, hey, we gotta do something about this. And then the less educated people, no offense to anybody in Alabama, they still say, well, they're still not human.
Hold on. I would probably say, rather than that, I've kind of always been on the impression that the South understood what all that free labor meant. And that there was really an effort on their part, like they had to somehow, the moment we say they're human, they have rights, and and there goes our free labor. So almost psychologically, or at least just debate-wise, they're trying to say, no, they're not
Absolutely.
human.
It could definitely be just like a psychological thing where they're trying to block it out, or they just, in denial or whatever. But yeah, that's not, they didn't see them as humans.
But neither you or I are experts on slavery.
No,
or on the
not.
history. This is just what we figured by watching South Park and Family Guy.
Let me tell you something. I did a 2-page essay in 6th grade on Harriet Tubman. All right, okay. I know all there is to know about slavery.
I am the foremost authority.
I am. They come to me when they want to know about Harriet Tubman. All right, so.
Well, that's very interesting, and I think it's very interesting the way that you took it from the dehumanizing there from slavery to the to Hitler to abortion and the dehumanizing. That's very interesting the way that you tie those together, and I can see that common thread in there.